Hey everybody, it's Women for Theology here, and today we're going to be talking about a topic that a lot of Christians practice and still practice and go by today. That really, we should be asking ourselves, is this something we should be partaking in? Is this something that we should be living by? Is this something that we should be going to for advice, for our life purpose, all of these things. We're going to talk about where it comes from. We're going to talk about how long it's been around, what it was back in ancient times, and what God thinks about it. So as a Christian, somebody who follows Jesus, you need to ask yourself, is this something that I really should be doing or partaking in? And that thing is astrology. So, what exactly is astrology? It's not to be confused with astronomy, which is actually the study of universe and its contents outside of the Earth's atmosphere. Astronomers examine positions and motions and properties of space, planets, sun, moon, sky, but it's not in the way that they do in astrology. It's not related in any way at all. Astrology, on the other hand, actually attempts to study how these positions, motions, and properties affect people on the earth in life events and how they tell the future. So we know astrology to be these little things that, back in my day, we used to read it in the back of Cosmo, in magazines. Nowadays, I'm sure it's more social media, online articles and things like that. But have you ever heard anybody say like, oh, I'm a Libra, or oh, I'm a Capricorn, or oh, I'm this way because I'm a Cancer, or we go well together because you're a Pisces and I'm a Cancer. And, it's like, it seems kind of fun. It seems kind of interesting, but this is actually something that God has a lot to say about, and he actually commands us to stay away from it. You might say to yourself, well, it's not really my intention to be doing like witchcraft or practicing divination. Like, that's not why I'm doing it. It just seems kind of fun. And, God says that, he put these things in the sky for times and signs and things like that. Couldn't it be related a little bit? Isn't that, that might be what you're thinking. But we're going to go into it. We're going to talk about it. We're going to see what the origin of it is, and how it's still used today. And we're going to decide, is this something that we can partake in as believers, as Christians? If you're a non-believer, obviously you don't hold to the same standards of God and, what Christians do. But I'm going to say that this is also not for the unbeliever, because you're opening yourself to demonic entities, you're opening yourself to supernatural things, and you're going to bring bad things your way, whether you believe in it or not. So, according to the Webster's Dictionary, astrology is the definition of astrology is the study of movements relative to positions of celestial bodies, sun, moon, stars, interpreted as having influence on human affairs in the natural world. And according to Britannica.com, astrology is divination. But what is divination exactly? According to the same source, divination is the practice of discerning the hidden significance of events and foretelling the future. The Bible has a lot to say about divination and the people who practice it, and what happens and happened to the people who practiced it. But before we get into that, let's talk a little bit about the history of astrology and where it all began. So how long exactly has astrology been around? The oldest records show that they belong to the second millennium BC, Old Babylonian period. However, Sumerians 1,000 years earlier had some understanding of the subject. Associating the sun, moon, and planets with their gods shaped the way the Babylonians lived their lives and viewed the world around them. So we kind of know, we kind of have heard about this. The practice started in Babylon and is still prevalent today, being passed down all the way from ancient times. So divination is actually found in all societies, from ancient to modern, though methods may vary. In the West, psychics claim innate ability to predict the future, and horoscopes, palm reading, and tarot cards are popular methods of divination. I bet you didn't know that. According to Scientific America, though, there is no evidence that there is any scientific evidence behind astrology. So there is actually there's no science behind it. There's no evidence behind it. There's nothing that we have that shows that this is for real and that it's reliable in any way. So did they practice it in the Bible? Yes, we know that they practiced it in the Bible. If you've ever read your Bible, you know very well that they practiced this in the Bible. God has a lot to say about this all through the Old Testament. I mean, he kicked entire populations out of cities and burned cities to the ground because of this practice, because of how evil that it was. And God exiled his own people to Babylon for doing these things, for idol worship and divination and practicing, sorcery and all of these kind of things. So yes, as we learned astrology, will go all the way back to Babylon and all other ancient societies. So let's talk a little bit more about astrology in Babylon and what they believed. So we can kind of get a better idea at exactly what they were doing and why this is bad. Okay. So the patron god of Babylon was Marduk. Okay. So it was not Yahweh. So they were already worshiping a demonic deity. And this god was recognized in Babylon's astrology as the planet Jupiter. So they were already correlating these things with planets and false gods and all these kind of things. So Marduk was recognized as the most powerful god, but not like the one and only God. So, they worship many gods. It wasn't like they just worship Marduk. They even sometimes worshipped Yahweh plus Marduk plus, these other false gods. So the Babylonians were polytheistic, believing in many gods with different purposes, and they associated certain gods with certain planets. God talks to us in a huge way about not doing these things. He's very upset when his people practice these things in the Bible all throughout the prophets and the Torah and, pretty much all throughout, Kings and Samuel and, all of those books, Joshua. I mean, this is all idol worship. This all goes back to idol worship. It's all connected to worship of false gods. So it's not just a little fun thing of like, oh, we're just, I'm just seeing what my sign is and who I fit well with based on the planets. No, goes back to demonic false god worship. So the Babylonians used horoscope astrology. It might have been their theology too, right? By observing the seasonal movements of the sun, moon, and planets, and the Babylonians connected their forecast with their future circumstances by observing space through time and relating ominous events such as lunar eclipses to social, political, and environmental problems and aspects of their everyday lives, such as giving birth to deformed children. This could be a problem. I mean, I could really see how that is a problem. I mean, one, God tells us not to go and try to seek out, what's the future going to be. He wants us to trust him in knowing what's best and knowing what the future is. And we're not supposed to seek these things out. He tells us not to do these things. So this is definitely going against what God tells us to do versus not to do. And there's reasons for that. I mean, gosh, I don't think I would want to know the future. I'm actually glad I don't know the future, because if something bad is going to happen, you're just going to sit there and stress out about it, and you might even bring it upon yourself if I don't know, you know what I'm saying, in a limited sense. It's different when it's like, oh, there's a hurricane coming, let me prepare, versus like, hey, I'm going to get in a car accident tomorrow, and then you might try to alter your your existence. But the thing is this is all kind of falsities anyway. This is all related to demons telling people like this is going to happen, and then they go and make it happen. So you're just asking for something bad to come your way. You're just taking a demon home with you. You're just bringing those things into your house. So it's no good. Yeah. And then, such as giving birth to deformed children, like, what does that mean? Does that mean that they thought that the reasons why their children were deformed was because of some planetary thing? And I don't know, that just bothers me, because those children are made in the image of God, and they're just as important as children who are not deformed. So did they treat them differently? I don't know. There's just a whole host of problems arise in my mind with this kind of thinking. Okay, so moving on. The Babylonians believed their gods' activities influenced their own lives. These celestial events were viewed by the Babylonians as divine intervention in their lives, using the influence of the sun, moon, and planets to communicate when bad or good events were going to occur. Horoscopic astrology is significant to God, to the way that their gods shaped their lives, and Babylonians viewed the world around them. The parallels between horoscopes and nativity omens from a Seleucid tablet shows the beneficent or maleficent natures of the planets in Babylonian astrology. Beneficent is like good and maleficent is like bad, so that's what that means. The Babylonians associated and created their beliefs around planets based on the nature of God associated with it. So basically, if the planet had a beneficent nature, it was believed to have like a positive attitude, or it did good. And a planet with a maleficent nature, it was like a bad doer, or it had like a negative attitude or attribute. So it was gonna, do bad or do good, and they believe that it had an influence and it provided guidance to humans as they live their lives, basically. So the planet's nature determines whether it's going to do good or bad for the people. So I guess that makes sense if they're looking at the alignment, or this planet is here and this time, and bad things or good things are going to happen. This is what they thought. This idea of doing this is completely against what God asks from us and teaches us. He doesn't teach us to rely on the planets or the creation. He teaches us to rely on him, and whatever good or bad happens, we're supposed to go to him. We're supposed to pray to him. We're supposed to rely on him and his nature, not the nature of the planets and where they are and what they're doing. So this is just completely off the wall. This is completely against what God wants us to do and what God expects from us. So yeah, we're already way off the rails with that. So the Babylonians divided the fixed stars into three groups: the stars of Anu, Enlil, and Ea. To which group they belong depended for most of them on where they rose in the eastern horizon. So this is how they would read the stars and the planets, and it sounds similar to what people do today. The horizon was divided into paths of Anu, and these three, Enlil and Ea. This gives reference to which gods the Babylonian astrologers associated to regions of the sky or space, and it's an example of how the gods were associated with stars and planets. Of the planets, 5 were recognized: Jupiter, Venus, Saturn, Mercury, and Mars, to name them in order which they appear in the older cuneiform literature, and in later texts, Mercury and Saturn change places. So this kind of gives a little history of kind of the way that they did astrology back in Babylon. I have heard people talking today the same way about astrology. Venus is in, Scorpio and whatever, it's over here, so this is going to happen now, blah, 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 etc., etc. This is kind of what people are doing. So they believed the whole thing with like Aries and Capricorn and Libra and Cancer, Taurus, all of these things, the movements of the sun, the moon, and the 5 planets were regarded as representing the activities of the 5 gods in question. So together with the moon god, goddess Sin and Salardi, and the sun god Shamash, and preparing the occurrences on earth. If therefore one could correctly read and interpret the activity of these powers, one knew what the gods were aiming to bring about. So they're always trying to figure out what the gods are going to do. This doesn't make any sense to me, because let's say you believe in these gods, that they have these powers, and even if you can figure out what they're going to do, I mean, what power do you have over it if they really are a god, if this is really what you believe? I'm just saying. So they would also do like medicine type practices with this, to where they believe that it was like an astral medicine kind of thing. So for example, they would do different remedies created for patients on different days depending on the date. So it would be like maybe, if it was an Aries, they would use sheep blood, sheep fat, or sheep hair to anoint you. Capricorn, they would use goat blood, goat fat, goat hair. For Libra, they would use an empty place to anoint you. So they would like maybe empty out your space or something. Cancer, they would use crab blood and crab fat. This sounds kind of similar as to why these symbols are used for these things. So this is really important to know why these things are used. Taurus, they would use bull blood, bull fat, or bull hair to anoint you. Aquarius, they would use an eagle head, a wing, and blood to anoint you in these medicinal practices, probably similar to like cleansings and stuff that people do nowadays. Scorpio, it would be an empty place, and then you would anoint it. For Leo, it was lion's blood, fat hair, etc. Gemini, it was rooster. Dove for Pisces, or a swallow. They would use the head and the blood to anoint you. Sagittarius, it was like a bird called an anzu. Don't know what that is. Maybe I'm assuming it's extinct nowadays or something. But Virgo, they would use barley flour, a raven head, or a raven wing. And so they would use this as medicinal purposes. So some of these are still symbolized today, like Cancer is still the crab, Aries is still the goat or the sheep or whatever. Oh no, Aries is the sheep, Capricorn's the goat, Taurus is the bull. Aquarius, it says eagle, but I don't know what's up with that because they use a different kind of deal with that nowadays. Leo is the lion. Gemini has the rooster, but that's different. Today they have it like the twins. I don't know. So yeah, some of these practices clearly go all the way back to ancient times and it's still tied to that, and they're still using a lot of that today. So it really kind of makes you think, it makes you realize now why God told the Israelites not to eat or drink the blood of animals, because it sounds like they used a lot of these kind of things in these practices. So yeah, something to think about with all of this. So let's talk a little bit about what the Bible says about these kind of practices. The consensus is clearly unanimous. What the Bible says about astrology, it says no. It's a hard no. There's no way around it. There's no getting around it. There's no like, oh, well, it's okay if you're just doing it for fun. No, there's really not any way around it. Isaiah 47:13-15 says, all the counsels you have received has only worn you out. Let your astrologers come forward, those stargazers who make predictions month by month. Let them save you from what is coming upon you. Surely they are like stubble. The fire will burn them up. They cannot even save themselves from the flame. Each of them goes on in his error. There is not one that can save you. Oh, wow. That's pretty serious, huh? Then it also says, when you enter the land of the Lord your God is giving you, this is in Deuteronomy, do not learn the intimate and the detestable ways of the nations there. Let no one be found among you who sacrifices their daughter or their son in the fire. That means they used to sacrifice their children to, I think, Molech, I believe it was. Yeah, they used to sacrifice their children to Molech. They used to throw them on the burning I know this is graphic, so yeah, trigger warning if if you're sensitive, but yeah, they used to put the live baby on this burning statue of Molech, and the baby would burn to death. It's atrocious. It's horrible. So yeah, he says, don't do these things. He says, anybody who let no one be found among you who sacrifices their son or daughter in the fire, who practices divination or sorcery, interprets omens, engages in witchcraft or casts spells, or who is a medium or a spiritualist who consults the dead. Anyone who does these things is detestable before the Lord. Some versions say is an abomination. Because of these same detestable practices, the Lord your God will drive out those nations before you. You must be blameless before the Lord your God. So he's saying that the reason why I'm driving these nations out of these towns and cities is because they're doing these things. He says these things are so detestable to me and such an abomination to me that I'm driving them out of the land so you, my holy people, can come in. So that's what he's telling them. He's telling them, don't do these things, because if you do them, then I'm going to drive you out too, because these things are disgusting to me. These things are detestable to me. And then it also says after that, the nations you will dispossess, listen to those who practice sorcery, divination. But as for you, the Lord your God has not permitted you to do so. So yeah, there's no doubt about it. It's not just for fun. God didn't create the moon and the stars so that we could not rely on him, not go to his word, not pray to him, not trust him, and go to these things. He created them for beauty. He created them for times and seasons. Like he said, he created them for us to marvel over and to enjoy. He didn't create them for omens, and he didn't create them for fortune telling and for the future and divination type practices. So there's a whole lot more scriptures that talk about this. I mean, go to the book of Judges, go to Isaiah, go to Hosea. I mean, the whole book of Hosea talks about how God is so grieved over his people worshiping idols and doing these witchcraft practices. The whole book of Hosea talks about it. Jeremiah, Isaiah, all the prophets, Hosea. I mean, the whole Old Testament from Joshua to Malachi talks about idol worship and witchcraft and divination and those who practice astrology and those who practice these things, and how God hates it and how he says no. So there is no shortage of scriptures. This is just a couple of them. It would take hours for me to read all of them. But like I said, if you're still not sold and you want to research it for yourself, feel free. Go to any of those books of the prophets and you'll see plenty of information about how God feels about this stuff. He's not doing it in the way to, get rid of all your fun and to just be like, oh, I just don't want you to enjoy yourself and I just want to take something away from you. He's doing this in protection of you, because when you do these things, you open yourself up to demonic entities, and you're participating in idol worship because you are relying on something else instead of God. You are getting your information for what decisions you're going to make in your life based off the moon and the stars and the constellations and whatever you think is up there controlling things. You're basically saying, I don't believe that God is controlling these things. I believe the sun, moon, and the stars are controlling these things instead of God is controlling the sun, moon, and stars and what they do, versus these things are controlling themselves and what's happening on the earth. So if you think about it in that sense, if you're partaking in these things, if you're claiming these things for yourselves and you're a believer, I'm a Cancer, I'm a Sagittarius, I'm a Virgo, I'm a whatever, I think you've got to stop and think about what you're doing. I know it's trendy. I know it's something that we don't even think about most of the time. We're just like, oh yeah, I'm a this and this is why we get along. But that's not why. That's not why we get along. That's not what connects us. It's not what connects us to other people. So these are all things that we need to consider and we need to think about when deciding to partake in these things. And we need to run away from anything that is demonic or from the devil. And that's what these things are. The devil perverts whatever God gives us that is beautiful and good and holy. God gives us these beautiful stars and this beautiful sky and these things to look up to that have a function and have a purpose, but that is not their function and that is not their purpose. So Satan uses it to have a purpose that God did not choose for it. He says, okay, God used it for times and seasons. I'm going to go ahead and use it to deceive people and make people make it their God and make people think that they can tell the future from it and they can rely on me instead of God and what I say and what I am teaching them instead of what God teaches them. So you see how he kind of perverts everything. He's done the same thing. I don't want to get off on a tangent, but he's done the same thing with pretty much everything on this earth. He's done it with sex. God said sex is beautiful between a man and a woman in marriage, between two people. They stay together forever, of course, unless one decides to go out of the bounds of marriage and, have infidelity. Of course, he gives, different things for that. But what was meant for it was to be in a beautiful relationship between one woman and one man. And then there's no, there's no room for other bad things to come in, because if everybody was monogamous just with each other, there wouldn't be any STDs, there wouldn't be diseases going around, there wouldn't be issues that you see with polygamy and jealousy and people not being treated equally. That's a whole nother topic. But Satan goes and perverts it. He perverts sex and marriage and makes it into something else. He says, you can do it with anybody, you can do it with everybody, you can do it any kind of way. You can do it with women and men and women and children and adults and everybody and everything, and it could be anything that you want it to be. But that's not how it works. That's not what it was meant for. The same thing with the stars and the moon. The same thing with lots of things in the world. Of course, there are some things that can be redeemed, but there are other things that cannot be redeemed, and this is one of them. Astrology, divination, sorcery, tarot cards, witchcraft, spells, these cannot be redeemed. The only way that you can supposedly redeem any of this is when God gives certain powers for miracles to people. For example, prophecy. God gives prophecy to people, and people could say, that's telling the future. But it's different, because the people who get prophecies, they're not looking for it. They're not seeking it out. They're not like, hey, God, I need you to tell me the future. I need you to tell me this thing. And you have to tell me, and I'm going to manipulate you in order to get that answer. That's not how it works. When people seek out prophecy, or people are asking God in a prayer, they say, God, will you give me, revelation? Will you give me information? And God decides whether he's going to do it or not. He says yes or no. Nobody can manipulate God into doing those things. So, and if you are, you're going about it the wrong way. And you're not doing it the way God commands us to do it. And those things all come from God. And most of the time, like I said, prophecy is not something you're looking for, asking for. It just, God just kind of gives you that gift, or it comes to you, or God reveals something to you, or gives you a revelation. He gives you a dream, so on and so on. Those things do happen. But that's the only way that you could really say it could be redeemed, but it cannot be redeemed from witchcraft or anything like that. There's no way to redeem that. God does give us spiritual gifts. He does give us those things, but that's at his discretion, not ours. So at the end of the day, do your research, really read the word, pray about it if you're still on the fence of whether you should be doing this or not. You should let it go, and God will bless your life for that. And who knows, if you decide to let that thing go, maybe he will give you a gift to use in the proper way. So that's all I have to say about that. This is a video I've been wanting to make for a while. I feel like it's a really important topic because these things are on the rise. Witchcraft is on the rise. It's being mainstreamed. It's being put out in shows and TV. I can tell you all the shows I watch on TLC and all these kind of shows. It's like 20 years ago or 50 years ago, you would have never seen somebody come on these, on TV and say, "Oh, I'm a witch." But it's just normal now, and it's celebrated, and it's just terrible, and it's really sad as a believer to see that. So I hope you got some information. I hope this helped you understand what it's really all about. There's obviously way more information on it. There's more history on it, but this is just a little snippet of that. And go back and read the word and do your research and decide the right path for your life.